I just want to welcome everybody to another rendition of the B&H virtual event space. I am your host, Derek Fosmeter, and tonight we have Sony Artisan of Imagery, Tony Gale. So we'd like to welcome Tony. He's a wonderful, well-known friend here at B&H. We always love having Tony back in. Thank you all for joining. If you are on Facebook and watching on there, you can feel free to leave a question or a comment in the comment section below. If you are joining us on Zoom, we do have this in webinar mode, which means the question and answer tab is live. So I ask that you direct all questions to the question and answer tab. And if you do have any technical difficulties, you can contact myself via the chat mode right there. So Tony, without further ado, we're talking 50 states. I've probably been to about a quarter of them, if that. So I'll let you take it from here about shooting in states.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to today's Zoom webinar about photographing in all 50 states. As Derek mentioned, I am a Sony Artisan of Imagery. I'm also a Manfrotto Ambassador and Extract Pellerati and the APA National President. And a little bit more about me. I'm a commercial photographer. I primarily shoot people in portraits for companies, magazines, advertising. However, when I started out in photography, I wanted to shoot nature. I wanted to shoot travel in nature because who wouldn't? Who doesn't want to go to amazing places and see beautiful things? So I shot things like this kelp on the beach, Rialto Beach, Snoqualmie Falls in Washington, where I grew up. And that's what I started out wanting to do. But of course, it's a challenging way to make a living. So I primarily shoot people in portraits, which I absolutely love. Although what I'm doing right now is a self-portrait every day because I can't shoot people in portraits right now because we're all inside. I started traveling around, really traveling and starting to take pictures around 2000. I was assisting in Seattle at the time, and I worked with a really great photographer named Natalie Phobes on this project that took us to Europe. It was my first trip to Europe. This was the Paris Metro subway. This was Rome. And I started traveling more, exploring more, and realizing how much fun travel photography was. I started doing things like this picture of Venice and then adding that little guy on the bridge. This is Greece. And as I traveled more, explored more, I started wanting to do more of it and do more interesting things. Take better pictures, not always the same pictures everybody does. And so I started thinking about how to do that. And I started thinking about what could motivate me to travel more. You know, travel is fun. We all want to travel. We all wish we could travel right now. However, it's a little bit abstract. It's a little bit, I want to travel, but what does that mean? So I started thinking about making it a goal to travel to all 50 states. And the reason I started with that, I forgot the audio was on this. I'm going to turn that down. The reason I started with all 50 states is I realized between assisting and shooting and just life that I'd been to about a third of the states. And it seemed like a fun goal. It seemed fun to just see all 50 states. So I started thinking about how to do that. We'll skip that. So what I did is things like this. I would look at a state and I would look at an itinerary that would allow me to be as effective and as sort of practical and efficient as possible. So this particular trip here, I flew into Casper, Wyoming. Then I drove down to Saratoga Springs. I went into Nebraska, up through South Dakota, up into North Dakota, over to Montana, and then back down into Wyoming. That was one trip. It was, according to Google Maps here, it was about 1,500 miles of driving in 8 days. But in doing that, I saw a lot of stuff in a lot of states. I saw a lot of really beautiful things, and it made it a practical thing. I remember when I was first starting to travel, talking to people that would say, oh, travel, it's easy. You just decide you're going to travel, and thinking how absurd that sounded. Like, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. That doesn't make any sense. And I do think just saying, oh, I'm just going to travel, it's as simple as that, is an oversimplification. And it's great if you're in a position that you can just choose to do that. But a lot of people aren't. Most people aren't. So looking at something like this, where you can take a week and see a lot of great things, makes a lot of sense to me. So part of the reason I flew into Casper is I was looking at where can I fly into that I can get a rental car with unlimited miles. You saw 1,500 miles or so on that trip. If I have a mileage limit on the rental car, that's a problem. So I looked at every city sort of in that area that I could fly into. And then I looked at the rental cars for each of those cities to see who had unlimited miles, because in that part of the country, not everything does. Like if you fly into LA or San Francisco or Seattle, I've never seen a car that didn't have unlimited miles. But in Montana and Wyoming, most of them didn't. So that's why I chose Casper. And then I also chose Casper because at that particular time, I had 25,000 miles on an airline that were about to expire. And so I figured I'll use those miles to fly somewhere, and I'll use those miles to fly somewhere that would be really expensive to fly to if I paid cash. You know, if you fly New York to LA or San Francisco or Seattle, you can get flights for $300 pretty easily. If you fly to Montana or Wyoming, a good flight might be $500-$600. It's a lot more. So probably not now, but in general, it's quite a bit more. And so I chose Casper, Wyoming, both because it was an expensive place to fly that would cost me nothing with a frequent flyer ticket, and because of the unlimited miles on the rental car. I learned in Wyoming that a lot of roads are dirt. Wyoming only has 500,000 people. It's in a 16th the size of New York City, which is crazy. It's crazy to me that there's states that are a 16th the size of the city that I live in. But there's a lot of roads that are dirt. It's beautiful. The skies are amazing. You have Devil's Tower there. If anybody's seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, this is where the aliens land. If you haven't seen it, sorry for the spoiler. With Devil's Tower and with this shot, this camera, it's on a tripod, obviously. It's a 30-second exposure to get the stars at 3200 ISO. I've found when I shoot stars that I'm almost always at 3200 ISO and 30 seconds. At 30 seconds, the stars are moving just a little, which makes them feel a little bit bigger, so they show up a little bit more. But you do want to be careful if you're going much longer than that, that you'll start getting streaks that don't feel natural until you get the super long, super cool streaks. And there are people, of course, who will tell you that the way I just said I do it is totally wrong. You don't do it that way, and that's fine too. Everything I tell you, I promise you someone somewhere is going to say, don't do it that way. That's terrible. That guy's an idiot. That's fine. I'll tell you how I do it. They can tell you how they do it. You can try it a third way. It's photography. If it gets you the results you want, you did it right. If it doesn't, try something else next time. And then Devil's Tower with a bison during the day. This, I can never remember the name of it. This is a place in the middle of Wyoming that I only found because when I travel on trips like this, I tend to not pick where I'm going to go until that morning. So I knew I was going from Casper to Saratoga, but that's as far as and the states I wanted to go to. And then I'd get up in the morning, look at a map, see what I'd learned that day, see if I'd talked to people who'd suggested things, and then decide from there what city I wanted to end up in, book a hotel room, usually on hotels.com. I don't have any affiliation with any travel sites, but just because it was easy. And they give you essentially 10% off. So I get up in the morning, look at a map, say, you know, I think I want to end up in that city. That city looks good. If I go there, I'll see interesting things in between. And what that does is it allows me to go visit places like this, which I saw a sign for. I can't remember the name of it. It's in the middle of Wyoming. There's petroglyphs there. And it was like 6 miles on a dirt road, to the point where you follow the sign and you know you're on the right road. And then you start feeling like, this can't be right. I must have done something wrong. I hope the rental car does okay on this road. And it was fine. And it was cool. There was no one there. Only me and the white rocks and the petroglyphs. It was super cool. But if I had a more rigid schedule, if I had a more rigid itinerary, I never would have taken the time to go there. So I find with travel, part of what makes for good travel photography is flexibility. You know, maybe the weather isn't good, so you change your plan. Maybe you meet somebody who suggests, hey, this place is cool, that place is cool. You see a sign for something that looks interesting. If you're flexible, you can find some really great stuff.
Tony, how anal are you with preparing? Like, are you just like, hey, I found the cool spot, I'm just gonna maybe pick three locations in a given area that I want to check out, or are you the type that plans every single hour of your day out when you travel?
I do not plan my day out at all. I will pick sometimes places I want to go, and if I feel like, based on the weather and the light, that one of those places I want to be at a certain time, I'll plan around that. Although sometimes you sort of get skunked with that. But for the most part, I'm much more loose than that, just because I've found, unless I'm looking for a specific shot, that if I'm looser, I have more fun and I find more interesting things. And the challenge of planning ahead and looking for a specific shot, unless you've been there before and you know what you're looking for, is you only know about those specific shots because you've seen them. And while I've done plenty of shots that you've seen 1,000 times, but this one's different because it's mine, even though it's 95% the same as everything you've seen before. You know, there's a shot in Machu Picchu that everybody does because it's a beautiful shot. Sure, the clouds were different when I did it and the fog was different, but it's not a super unique shot. Aside from those, I would rather explore and find something that I haven't seen before, even though it may have been photographed before. It probably has been, but hopefully I've brought something different to it, rather than looking on Instagram, you know, doing the hashtag search, and then looking for that shot that you've seen 500 people do or 1,000 people do, and it's all kind of the same. That's less interesting to me. Sometimes I'll go to that spot to see that spot, but I will rarely put much effort into photographing that same thing. I'm also very interested in taking advantage of the fact that with a mirrorless camera, it's small and it's light. So currently I shoot with the A7R4, some of these with the R2, the R3. But with those cameras, because of the flip up screen and also because you can control it with your phone, you can get the camera into places that would be challenging with a traditional DSLR. So things like this shot here is at Teddy Roosevelt National Park, which I didn't know existed until I was there. Badlands in South Dakota I went to, and that was definitely on the list. And while I was there, I learned, oh, there's a national park in North Dakota. It's Teddy Roosevelt National Park. I had no idea. So if I'd planned ahead, I wouldn't have taken the time to go because I would have had to go wherever. This rock that we're looking at is about 10 inches high. But because I was able to go in with a wide angle lens and get in nice and tight, it feels huge. To me, this feels like it's, 10 feet high, but it's tiny. But just getting in there with that little tiny mirrorless camera and getting in nice and low. Nebraska. This is in Badlands National Park, which is beautiful. Badlands is someplace that I've wanted to go since I was a kid. On this whole trip, the only place I for sure wanted to go was Badlands and to see the Wounded Knee Memorial. And I did both of those. Beyond that, everything else was, we'll see. I did see Mount Rushmore because I had a friend that's like, you have to go. But to be honest, you don't have to go. If you're there and you want to see it, go see it. But it's not, I mean, it's interesting, but.
I mean, while you bring that up, if you do the math, right, for a lot of people, they're not going to get to, seeing 50 states and really not just driving through them. It takes time.
Yep.
And people want to see the world as well. So, unless you live to be 150 years old, it is a pretty daunting task. Can you maybe give us one or two places that you've been that really you don't feel that there's a lot of hype behind them? You don't feel if you could do it all over again, you would be like, wasn't really that great.
So places I don't think are worth visiting?
Yeah, so places like, that have a lot of hype behind them, like, oh, it's a must visit, and then you went there and you just didn't see the hype.
I find that more often than not, actually. Mount Rushmore for sure. I mean, it was fine, but it's such a hassle to get there, and I wouldn't make it on the list. My 50th state was Mississippi, and no offense to people that live in Mississippi, but I found Mississippi to be underwhelming, but I don't know that there's a lot of hype there. I do find, and this is the bias I have living in New York City, that with cities in the United States that people really love, I rarely appreciate that much when I visit because I'm coming from New York where everything is here. So you go to, I don't know, Kansas City, and Kansas City does have really good barbecue, but everything else is like, it feels like a small town. Every town feels like a small town compared to New York. And a lot of them tend to feel like one another. But that said, that's me. Like the barbecue in Kansas City, that's worth going for. And, everybody's going to have different opinions, and that's what's great. But I'm trying to think if there were any other, the places that you think of.
I'm trying to
just
save myself some travel here.
Well, I'm going to let that mull around.
Think on it.
Yeah, because I'm sure that there are places.
Mm-hmm.
But usually the places that I'm not impressed by, I just sort of let go and I don't think about them anymore. If you have places in mind, let me know.
There you go. That might, hey, if anybody's listening and you were thinking about your one-shot vacation, like we're bringing the family here next year, if you want to drop it in the chat section, we'll ask Tony if it's worth it.
Yeah, and if I've been there,
There you go.
I've been to all 50 states, but I haven't been everywhere in all 50. There's a lot of places to go.
Exactly.
So as I'm traveling, what do I bring? Obviously, that's important. This is sort of a rough general kit if I'm traveling and not hiking. So it's changed a little since I took this picture, but always at least two bodies, and usually the RX100 and an RX0. So that's four. But the RX100 is always with me, and the RX0 is so small that it hardly counts. But it's great because it's waterproof. It can shoot 4K video. You can drop it. So if you have a shot where you want to do something really close to that waterfall or behind that waterfall, the RX0 is great for that. I will bring the 12 to 24, 100 to 400, the 2X extender, 24 to 70 or the 24-105, 24-14 to shoot stars with. And then it just sort of depends beyond that. I'll usually bring a speed light and a battery pack and the wireless controller so that I can use the light off camera, a bunch of Sony cards, color checker, because color is important. The iPad Pro, if I think I'm going to use the camera wirelessly using the Sony Imaging Edge app that will let you control the camera, I'll try and use the iPad just because it's easier to see the screen. And it all fits in my Manfrotto roller. That's important. It needs to go on the plane with you. If I feel like I'm going to go on a plane that is too small for a regular rolling bag, I'll bring it in a hard case. I have a hard case Manfrotto as well. But the hard cases don't hold as much stuff. So if it really will depend. And if I can, I'll actually change the trip to avoid those little planes, but sometimes you don't have a choice. You know, you're on a Dash 8 or something and everything gets gate checked. And that's a terrifying experience when you've got a bunch of stuff in there and it's out of your hands and the bag isn't super, super hard.
Oh, Tony, we had somebody jump in. They took us up on the offer.
Okay.
So Redwoods, Yosemite, Yellowstone, Pacific Northwest. Now, Pacific Northwest as a whole, but I'm going to add a caveat here. For the people who are not nature photographers, is it something, you know, that you might go there and you don't know what you're doing. You're not Ansel Adams. Is it worth the hype for somebody who just wants to go there and maybe won't get some of the amazing shots that some of these wildlife and nature photographers are taking?
Well, so that's a lot of places. That was Redwoods, Yosemite. I don't remember what you said, and then Pacific Northwest.
Let's group the whole Pacific Northwest in general, I guess you could say, from your experience.
So this is something where I have a bias because I grew up in Bellingham, Washington, which is an hour and a half north of Seattle.
Ah. Okay.
Of the 50 states, I still think Washington is the most beautiful in its diversity because you've got the Pacific coast, you've got the Olympic Peninsula with the rainforest and the sea stacks and the mountains, the Olympic Mountains, and then you have the Sound, and then you have the Cascade Mountains, you've got volcanoes, you've got the most heavily glaciated peaks in the lower 48 outside of Alaska. So I think it's absolutely worth it. As you move south, it changes. So Oregon is beautiful. It's not quite as diverse, but Crater Lake is incredible. And the Oregon coast is beautiful. Then as you get down into California, because it's so big, has some pretty incredible stuff. The redwoods are amazing. That said, if you had a choice, I would go to see Sequoia National Park and Kings Canyon over the redwoods. The redwoods are beautiful and it's absolutely worth going, but Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Park were more take your breath away from me. The General Sherman and the General Grant, which are two of the largest trees in the world, the General Sherman's 30 feet in diameter, are there. And if you do go there, they're right next to each other. I don't know why they're two separate parks, because it's like, you know, Queens and Brooklyn, like they just share a border. You step from one into the other. But I did find that Sequoia had a lot more people in it than Kings Canyon, even though they're essentially the same park.
Interesting.
Did that answer the question?
Steven looks to be happy with that answer. So.
All right. But yeah, the Northwest, absolutely. It's beautiful.
Sure.
It's a lot of driving if you're going to do that, though. I also always bring a tripod with me. Usually my Gitzo Traveler, because it folds up small enough and it's light enough that I can just carry it and I don't feel like I'm bringing this heavy thing for no reason. For star stuff, you absolutely need it. If you're trying to do the waterfall with the milky long exposure, you need it. As it gets dark, there's a lot of reasons to have it. When you're doing pixel shift, which I'll talk about in a little bit, you need it. So a good tripod is absolutely worth it. I love the Gitzo Traveler. You do want something that is sturdy enough that the camera is stable. So be careful with that. There are tripods that are inexpensive and light, but maybe not really a good support for your camera. So just think about that. And then depending on what I'm doing, I'll bring a backpack with waters. Bring lots of water if you're hiking, especially out west. And then the backpack I'll bring, I have 5 or 6 different ones, and it just depends on what kind of trip I'm anticipating. I did a hike in the Grand Canyon last summer where I hiked rim to rim, and that was with a low pro bag that was quite a bit bigger than this, so I could carry clothes and cameras and stuff like that. Then as an example, another trip, so that Montana, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming trip was one of the first I did when I really decided I wanted to do this. and it was one of the best trips I've done like that. Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma was interesting, but not as dramatic. Dallas, Arkansas with a little flooding, swim up picnic tables and barbecue grill. So what I found challenging with this trip is it was harder to find things I wanted to see. So I would do a lot of things like this. I found by just looking on Google Maps for where I was and then looking to see if there were state parks around me. And this state park whose name escapes me was 20 minutes from where I was when I opened up my phone and looked on Google Maps. And this I thought was super cool. However, there were signs everywhere. You can see one that says don't enter the water, even though it's clearly designed as something that you're supposed to sit in. I followed the rules, but it was really like, that's so obviously designed to sit on. It's got that little bench in there. And Sunset in Dallas, always be ready to stop the car and jump out. The number of times I've pulled to the side of the road or taken the next exit because the light looked good or I saw something cool. You never regret taking the picture, but I often regret not taking the picture.
Tony, do you often travel alone? I mean, I know that's a huge thing. Stephanie and I we were in Las Vegas recently for WPPI, and I apologize probably 1,000 times. I'm like, I'm going to pull over whenever I see something, even if it's every 100 yards. So I think it's key to have somebody that appreciates that. Do you travel alone mostly, or do you have people you travel with that are on the same page?
It's about half and half. It used to be almost always by myself for that reason, because I have found as I've tried to travel with people that there are a lot of people that will say, yeah, that's no problem that you want to take pictures. That's cool. You can stop whenever you want. It's flexible. And then when it gets down to it, it's not really the case. And that's fine if you're like based in a city and they want to go do something and then you want to go do something else and then you meet up later for dinner. But I've found a lot of people, if they're traveling with you, they expect it to be a social thing where they're hanging out with you more. And so that can be challenging. That said, my girlfriend, for the last 3.5 years, every summer, we've done a trip to visit national parks. And she has been fantastic. Like you want to stop? Great. She's always happy to do it. She loves the pictures I take. We got her a little Sony A6300, so she takes pictures too sometimes. Nice. She's super supportive of it, and it's been great. But I will say that first trip we did, we had a long talk about it. I was very skeptical, and I was fully expecting that first trip to be the last big trip we did together. And it hasn't been. It's been great. But it's a challenging thing. All right. And then this is one, I'm going to show you a couple things that surprised me. So as you can see, I typically, with the goal to see all 50 states, would pick somewhere where I could see more than one state in some period of time. I didn't count seeing a state if I didn't do something real in that state. So for me personally, and this is, everybody's got their own idea of what counts. If I just drove through, it didn't count. I needed to do something. It didn't have to be something huge, but you go to a museum or something. Or to me, it didn't count. There is a club called the 50 States Club that you can join if you've been to all 50. And their thing is if you breathe the air and touch the ground, which I think is a little loose. So you didn't hold your breath as you drove through and then you stopped and got gas once. But I don't want to criticize someone else. It's not like there's a rule. There's no, whatever works for you.
I went to Dunkin' Donuts in New Hampshire and I counted it. The only reason I stopped to get coffee just so I could say that I got out of the car. I'm guilty of it.
But you got Dunkin' Donuts, which is a Northeast thing.
There you go.
You can make an argument for that.
All right. You'll let it slide for me.
I'm going to say you make your own criteria, not me. If you feel like you've been to New Hampshire, then you've been to New Hampshire.
That works.
So for this, Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio, I know the 3 states that everybody's dreaming of, right? Maybe not. I flew into Indianapolis, drove down to Kentucky, and then over to Ohio and then back. While on this trip and heading down to Kentucky, I learned about Mammoth Cave National Park, which I didn't know about at the time either. Mammoth Cave is incredible. You should absolutely go to Mammoth Cave. I have a picture here. This is, you know, a little fixer-upper in Kentucky. If anybody is thinking, you know, they want to move, needs a little bit of work. Then this is Mammoth Cave. Mammoth Cave is the largest cave system known in the world. There's over 400 miles that they've explored of cave, all connected. It's amazing. One of the advantages of traveling alone in this instance was full of hubris and overconfidence. I showed up in the morning. You can only really go into the caves on a tour. There's one little spot you can go without a tour, but to see anything, you know, really cool, you have to go on a tour. And everything was sold out, except for one really short tour. So I stood in line. I got to the front of the line. They said, "Are you by yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh, well, there is one spot open on this 2.5-hour tour instead of that 45-minute tour." I'm like, "Sold, I'll take it." So it pays to travel by yourself sometimes. And it's amazing. Mammoth Cave is incredible. It's so big. I've since read a book about it. If you're in Kentucky and you don't go to Mammoth Cave, you're missing out. Indiana. So one other thing that is great if you're shooting travel stuff with Sony in particular, I'm a Sony artisan. Sony is the stuff I use. I'm sorry if this isn't relevant to some of you, is pixel shift. So pixel shift is something where the camera physically moves the sensor. On the A7R III, it moves the sensor 4 times, and what it does is it debayers the image, so it gives you more accurate color. Just to go on a nerdy tangent for a minute, when you're taking a picture, there's 2 greens, a red and a blue photo site. There's a grid of that. And so if it hits the green, that's what it gets. If it hits the red, that's what it gets. If it hits the blue, that's what it gets. And then it sort of puts it together so that you see color. With pixel shift, it moves it so all 4 photo sites get all 3 colors. So you get more accurate color. With the A7R4, it actually can do a 4-shot, which is the same, or a 16-shot. So it gives you more accurate color, and it's 4 times the size. So it gives you a massive file. So the A7R4, 61 megapixels, which is 9,504 by 6,336 pixels, which is a pretty big file. This is a pixel shift shot. You can see a little bit of a difference in the color. It's 240 megapixels, 19,000 by 12,600 pixels, which is about 63 by 42 at 300 ppi. So it's a huge file. The challenge, of course, is that nothing can move, although I have done some fun stuff where stuff does move. But you're not supposed to shoot anything that moves. So you need to be locked down on a tripod. And if you're shooting, you know, the trees blowing in the wind, it's going to get a little weird. But for anything that doesn't move, you know, you're in Death Valley is a great place for pixel shift. It's really an incredible feature. And then you can see here, it's 4 times the size, that pixel shift. So this is the relative size, 61 megapixels in the lower left, and then everything else 240 megapixels. It is one of the things that I think is the most underutilized. I don't know a lot of people that use it, and I think anybody with these cameras should.
Tony, we just had a question come in on the pixel shift,
Sure.
asking how you dealt with the flags in with the pixel shift.
The flags. Oh, so I have found that if what is moving is minimal, if you use the Sony software to assemble the pixel shift, it does a pretty good job of you not noticing. If there were a lot of things moving, it gets weird, but just those little flags at the bottom, and you can see like the car headlight streaks in the windows and things like that. It does a really good job at dealing with that in a way, I don't know, algorithmically, that it's not really a problem until you have a lot of things moving. There is some third-party software that will do it as well. And for a while, I was using that because in some ways it's easier to use than the Sony software. However, I found that with the third-party software, if anything moved, it got glitchy and it didn't work. Like everything had to be rock solid. Whereas with the Sony software, some things can move, some minimal things can move, and it does fine. But your results may vary. Another thing to think about is if you're shooting travel photography, take a lot of pictures, more pictures than you think, in part because a lot of the shots I take end up not being what I wanted. And some of the shots I take that I'm like, yeah, why not? I'll just do one more are my favorite shots. Those are the best shots. You just don't know. So that was about 500 frames. That was me hiking from the bottom of the Grand Canyon out. I had my camera strapped with a carabiner through the camera strap on the shoulder of the backpack strap so that I could easily get it. And anytime I saw anything, I would stop and take a picture. And usually I'll take 2 or 3 frames because digital is amazing. It's not film. I don't have to worry about carrying enough film, or I've only got 36 exposures or 12 exposures or whatever. I've got as many cards as I need and always have more cards than you think you need. I have, I think, probably 1.5 terabytes or 2 terabytes worth of SD cards because I never want to be in a situation where I can't take a picture or I'm forced to delete something in camera because I didn't have a card. It's the challenge with deleting in camera. Sometimes I've heard that it can cause a problem potentially, but the bigger problem for me is sometimes you can delete something in camera because you think it's not good, that if you looked on a computer screen, you might not want to delete. Obviously, if you're using flash and the flash didn't fire or something like that, it's a different story, but maybe there's a detail there, maybe there's something about it that if you saw it bigger, you wouldn't get rid of it. So why not just wait to get rid of it and put another card in? So for that was 500 frames while I was hiking out of the Grand Canyon. I would have taken more, but those last 2 miles were very, very painful. Worth it, but painful. Something else to think about is revisit the same places if you can. We only have so much time. We only have so much money. There's a lot of great places to see. But I've been to the Grand Canyon, for example, 3 times. Revisit the same places. I put that in there twice on purpose because it's revisit. So this is the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is amazing. It is just a big hole in the ground, but it is an incredible hole in the ground. We are very fortunate in the United States to have the landscape that we have and the national park system. There are amazing, incredible places all over the world without question, but I don't know of any other country that has the diversity that we have. We are really fortunate. This is the North Kaibab Trail. And then this is my second trip, also the North Rim. Also the North Rim. You see different things. The light is different. The weather's different. And you're able to maybe go back to that place where you had a picture that you really almost liked, but not quite, which is painful. I'm sure we've all had that. You're taking pictures, you've got something, you're sure it's going to be great, and then it's pretty good. and pretty good is so disappointing. Pretty good is worse than bad. Bad, you're like, I was wrong, it just didn't work. Pretty good is like, oh, if I just spent a little bit more time or just done one other thing, maybe it would have been really good. So this is the North Rim, also 30 seconds, ISO 3200. This is the highest point in the park. It's about, I think it's about 9,000 feet. And then this was my third trip to the Grand Canyon where I hiked through. So each time I saw different things. This is from the South Rim looking north. So if you go to the same place over and over, if you can, you are going to create better work. It's just going to happen. You're going to learn what works. You're going to learn what doesn't work. You're going to have the opportunity to try new things. You're going to get to know it better. Another thing to touch on, of course, is justifying the travel expenses. I'm a professional photographer. I want to be able to write things off, but it needs to be legitimate. I will say I'm not an accountant or a tax attorney. Talk to your own accountant. But what I do is I have worked with stock agencies. Now, stock is not what it once was. It doesn't sell even as much as it did 3 or 4 years ago for me, but things do sell. And so it is a business thing. So I've worked with Alamy. I will say as well, Alamy is good for people that want to get into stock and don't want to have to think about it too hard, because Alamy will accept anyone and they don't edit. As long as the work is technically adequate, they'll put it up. But you have to do all of the keywording, you have to do all of that. And I feel like the prices are too low. I haven't given them anything in a while because I've had rights managed stuff that sold for much, much less than I felt like it should. But we all have different ideas on what's reasonable. I've worked with Gallery Stock, who I feel like does the best job at pricing things the way that they should. And then I've worked with Offset, who's sort of in between. But with all of that, it gives me a place to put these pictures and something to do with them that can make me money. And it makes it easier to justify the trips as a whole, both tax-wise as a legitimate business expense, but also just where, none of us are made of money, or I'm not made of money. Maybe some of you are. If you are, fantastic. I'm very happy for you. For the rest of us, you have to, it's all a balancing act. So if I can make some money off of a trip so that I sort of break even, which I typically will, I won't make a lot of money off of it, but it'll at least be a break even. Then I get to do really cool things, see really cool places, and take some pictures.
I think that's a great point, Tony. When we talk about travel images, a lot of people, when they ask for advice on taking travel images, it's just so that they have better images to post or to print or to hang up or to look at. And I'd never really, until you said that, even thought of that as an option, about using your vacations and your travel as a chance to maybe get a little extra coin in your pocket from stock photos. That's pretty interesting outlook.
Yeah. I mean, even, like I said, even if it just takes the edge off of what you spent, it's something.
Mm-hmm. So, now, what are people looking at? What's a reasonable, I mean, for somebody who maybe isn't going to commit full time? I know there's stock photographers out there, that's all they do. But for somebody, I mean, can you maybe throw out like a very general ballpark, or as on a maybe a per image basis with some of these sites? Does it vary?
It does vary, and it varies so much that I hesitate to say.
Okay.
And like, to be honest, Offset 3 years ago, I was making about $1,000 a month.
Wow.
And now I'm making about $1,000 a year with
Wow.
more images. Like the different agencies change, the way that they sell things change. They're all very different. And so it's hard to say. All of these websites have blogs, and they'll talk about what sells and what doesn't sell. Alamy has a blog, and they interview people that have made 100,000 off from Alamy. And some of the people who've made a lot of money, when I look at the pictures that they put up, it reminds you that the pictures that people need for whatever purpose they need to buy pictures for, and the pictures you think are good are not necessarily correlated. Like sometimes all they need is that picture of B&H from the outside for an article about B&H in Topeka. And the fact that you're the only one who has that picture means that they bought it, even if it wasn't a good picture. So just putting it out there, as long as you have the time to do the keywording if you need to, is worth it.
What was the second? We had Alamy and Offset. What was the third?
Gallery stock.
Gallery stock, okay.
And gallery stock is the one that I think they charge the most, which is what I want. I'd rather sell less pictures for more money. I'm not interested in selling one picture 1,000 times. I'd rather, for $1 each, I'd rather sell one picture once for 1,000 than that same picture 1,000 times for $1 each time. And gallery stock is more in that mold. They're looking at a higher end customer. So the guy had a picture that I think some hotel or something bought the rights for one time in one place, and I think my cut was 2,600, 2,800.
Wow.
But that's because it's rights managed and because they charge appropriately. Everything is different. And I know people who do make a living on stock still, but it's not what it used to be.
Okay. I mean, that's at least a jumping off point. I mean, when you've thrown out numbers like that, it's probably way higher than what a lot of people would imagine.
Yeah, and there are things like iStock and Shutterstock, which are called micro stock, and those pictures are selling for $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, and typically people are getting 20% of that.
Mm-hmm.
And for those, to be honest, I don't understand why people do them, but people do, and I don't have to understand it. Some people do.
Now, as far as rights are concerned, is that you're basically just selling usage rights to it? You still own the rights to the photo?
Yes, these photos are all still mine. I am allowing these companies to sell licenses for those pictures. However, if it's royalty free, if someone licenses that picture once, they can kind of use it forever. If it's rights managed, they're licensing it based on the usage that they had in mind.
Okay.
Another thing, just especially now when we can't travel really, think about traveling locally. So wherever you are, there's something cool. Somebody wants to travel to where you are. Everywhere has some tourism, some places more than others. And so think about what it is that's cool where you are. I mean, New York City, we've got the skyline. This is from Hoboken.
What about upstate? We have Marcelino is up in the Hudson Valley, and I know we got Catskills, Adirondacks, Finger Lakes.
I've got one up here from Watkins Glen in a second.
Okay, perfect.
I wanted to stick super local to New York, even though I know people are listening from all over.
There we go, Washington Heights right there.
Yeah, the little red lighthouse, Times Square, when there were people in it. Coney Island on Christmas Eve. Watkins Glen, upstate.
There we go.
Watkins Glen is incredible. It's magical. It's I learned about it from those bus ads or subway ads for New York State tourism. There's some amazing things in New York State. It's a really cool state once you get up there. And then just for those people who really want to travel more, I'm just going to show you one of the ways that I do it. And again, I have no affiliation with any travel site. Just to be clear, this is just how I do it. I use Google Flights. And with Google Flights, if you put in your departure city, your date range, and leave destination blank, it shows you a map. And that map just shows you what it would cost to fly to these places in that date range. So I picked January 6th to January 13th of next year because anytime sooner seemed silly. But on that date, and I don't know which airlines are what, you could fly to Miami for 157, San Francisco for 292, Jackson Hole, Wyoming for 384, Denver for 217 round trip. When you click on it, it gives you the airlines, and you can, some of them are basic economy, and so you can decide on what you want to do. But it gives you a way to start, especially if, like me, you think there's so many great places to go, and you're like, I want to go somewhere cool. If you decide that you have to go to Jackson, which is 384, but maybe you'd be okay going to Denver, which is not a little bit more than half, maybe Denver makes more sense. And then if you zoom in, it shows you the smaller cities. So, or look at this, Denver is 217, but Vail is 133. They're like, I don't know, an hour apart.
All right, I have 2 questions for you on this.
Yeah.
You travel a lot, so I think, again, it's personal preference, but for somebody who travels a lot, are there airlines, and again, this isn't an endorsement, are there airlines that you're preferential to?
Yes.
And the second part of the question is regarding gear check-in. Is there any best practices or advice you have for people who are traveling with photo gear?
Always carry your cameras on. Don't check them ever.
Is there anything you do check?
If I'm traveling with lights and stuff, I'll check that because I have to.
Okay.
But that travels in a hard case.
Okay.
Stands, tripod, that all gets checked. If I'm traveling with lights, that gets checked, but in a hard case, cameras never get checked. And like I said earlier, if I'm on a plane that's small, if I know I'm going to be on a plane that's small, I'll go with a hard-sided roller so that if I have to gate check it because it physically won't fit, I'll do that. I did fly, I don't know, 2-3 years ago, I was on this little flight from Newark to Philadelphia to connect. And I didn't realize that I was going to be on a little tiny plane, and I wasn't prepared for it. So I flew from Newark to Philadelphia with 2 bodies and 5 lenses on my lap. And the bag was empty, but underneath the plane.
Sounds comfortable.
At least it was a short trip. My favorite airline by far is Alaska. However, from New York, Alaska only goes to the West Coast.
Okay.
But they are, like, the crew is awesome. The customer service is great. If you fly enough, like I do, to have status, with the status I have, it doesn't cost me anything to change flights. There's a difference in fare, but if I need to cancel a flight, fine. I just get that as a credit, the full amount. Okay. There's no change fees. Beyond that, everybody has their different. I flew American for a long time before I switched to Alaska. Now it's, if I can't fly Alaska, it's usually Delta.
Okay.
But I do think if you fly enough, if you fly once or twice a year, it doesn't matter. But if you fly more than that, it's worth it to stick to one airline if you can, because the status, even the lowest status, will make your life better.
Okay. Interesting.
And then Google Flights also works for the rest of the world. So this is the same date range. You can fly to Paris January 6th through 13th for $291.
Oh, I'm in there.
Or Palermo for $982. Like it helps you see too that sometimes, like if Rome is $410 but Palermo is $982 and you just want to go to Italy, go to the place that's half the price.
There you go.
Although Palermo and Rome are both pretty amazing. You should see them both. And then, it's already 8:24. So I'm just going to zip through a bunch of other pictures. I
Wonderful.
wasn't sure. Always bring that tripod. It's Hawaii. This one you can download from the Alpha Universe website as a Zoom background.
Oh, there you go. For all of you who are doing Zoom webinars while working from home,
yep,
you have it right there. What's your favorite state, Tony?
Washington.
Okay,
but
that was a trick question. I wanted to see if if earlier, if you would.
beyond that, I mean, California, because it's so big and has so much diversity, California has things like Channel Islands National Park, which is off the coast of Southern California, and nobody goes there.
Mm-hmm.
I went there a couple years ago just on a day trip because there's ferries and you're limited in what you can do. And on the way back, this is going to sound like an exaggeration, but I promise you it is not. On the way back, we were surrounded by thousands of porpoises or dolphins, I'm not sure. Thousands. Like, you looked everywhere. They were everywhere. It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Like, there were some that were like surfing in the wake of the boat. It was so cool. I've never seen anything like that.
That's awesome. So is that going to double as if you could pick one state? You can't go to any other states the rest of your life. It would be Washington?
That's tough.
Look at that.
See, I'm tempted to go to with something like California because it's 4 times the size.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why not maximize?
Well, I think California has a little bit of the New York vibe where you have varying ranges. You have mountains and you have cities and shores.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's got more diversity than you think.
Sorry, Delaware. For those of you out there that were going to think he was going to, tax free.
No tax. Delaware, no Rhode Island.
Is there maybe a sleeper pick? Is there some place that is completely unassuming that? Because I know for me, and there's probably some people out there listening who are thinking the same thing. Like, there's times when I'm like, I want to go someplace that no one else is going. Like, Iceland and Cuba were high on my list, and I feel like they've been Instagrammed to death. Yeah. So it's hard to find it. Like, I want to find like that diamond in the rough. Is there any place that jumps out to you that is that diamond in the rough?
New Mexico.
Okay.
New Mexico is very cool. Wyoming is very cool. I mean, Wyoming has a city called Thermopolis that has this huge hot spring. It's so hot that you can't actually go in it. But next to it, there's a city-run thing where you can get into the hot spring water. But it's huge. This hot spring is like 200-300 yards across.
Wow.
It's enormous. And there were dinosaur bones there, and it's got Devil's Tower, and it's got the Snowy Pass, which is this road that's closed in the winter across these mountains. It's beautiful. And it's 500,000 people. There's no one there. It's like wow. I think Staten Island is around 500,000. The population of Staten Island only in an entire state. And it's not a small state.
Yeah. Sorry, Staten Island. I'm gonna have to go with the state. Now, have you been to Roswell, New Mexico? That's on my list. Okay.
I haven't been to Roswell. I've been to Santa Fe and Taos and Albuquerque, but not Roswell.
Okay. I mean, I saw they have a Dunkin' Donuts with a giant alien sign. So
I mean,
it's on the bucket list.
It's gonna have to be.
And Bobby wants to know about Utah and Colorado.
Well, Utah is amazing. Utah's got some incredible parks.
That's got to be top 5 for scenery.
It absolutely is. Utah is incredible. I mean, everybody knows Arches. Bryce Canyon is unbelievable. If you go to Bryce, and you can, there's a lodge that's right next to the rim, and it's absolutely worth staying there. It's hard to get space. When we went, just every few days, I kept checking for cancellations, and I was able to get 2 nights there. But you can get up for sunrise, walk 150 feet to the rim, watch the sun come up over the hoodoos, go back, take a nap, get up, go for a hike. It's incredible. And Canyonlands, Capitol Reef is really not very visited. It's in the middle of nowhere in Utah. But if you go to Capitol Reef, then there's also Great Basin National Park in Nevada that's not that far from that, where there's a glacier in Nevada, the only glacier in Nevada. Arches, of course, Zion. I mean, yeah, Utah is incredible. It's beautiful. And Colorado, Rocky Mountain National Park is nice. I liked it, but I did find it a little underwhelming. Back to your earlier question, like it's worth going if you're in Colorado, But Mesa Verde and Black Canyon of the Gunnison, also in Colorado, were both amazing. I mean, Mesa Verde, those cliff dwellings are unbelievable. I've wanted to see those since I was a kid. And Black Canyon of the Gunnison is this canyon that it's not as big as the Grand Canyon, but it's like straight down. And the walls of it are super dark. That's why it's called Black Canyon. And then the Gunnison is the river at the bottom. There's no trail into the canyon. They let 12 people hike in a day. You have to get a permit. We didn't do it. I wanted to, but my girlfriend was a little nervous. So we didn't do it. But 12 people a day can hike in, even though there's no trail. There's a path that it's not maintained, but that was pretty great. And the sand dunes in Colorado, incredible. Great Sand Dunes National Park. All of those parks I liked better than Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
But also Rocky Mountains was more crowded, so that might have been part of it.
Now I'm going to squeeze two last questions in here.
Sure.
As we are getting ready to close it out here. So Teresa, thank you for watching. Or Therese, thank you for watching on Facebook. She wants to know how you deal with people in your photos. Do you worry about the human element, or do you capture things as they are?
I usually try and avoid people. So this was Channel Islands National Park with people. That shot was made because of the kayaks. Oh, that's great sand dunes. Mostly, I just try and be patient.
Okay.
So typically, I'll just wait. I'll set up for the shot and I'll wait. And most of the time, where I am and the places I'm going, if there are people there, there's not that many. There are places like parts of the Grand Canyon, parts of Zion, some of these national parks where there's just people everywhere, and it's really challenging. But for the most part, if you just stand there and you wait, you'll have your moment. But I do prefer, for the most part, no people.
Perfect.
To me, it's a more interesting shot. Every once in a while, that silhouette of that person on top of the rock or whatever is cool. But usually that's not what it is. It's someone else, sitting down for a snack on the trail, right, ruining your shot.
Exactly.
When I hiked Zion, there's a path I took called, actually, I don't remember, Observation Point. It's like 4 or 5 miles each way. And it leads to this super high overlook. And it's beautiful. And I was taking some pictures, and then there was another picture I wanted to take. But there were 3 people sitting on the edge, eating their lunch. And, it's not my park. It's everybody's park. But at the same time, I'm like, other people want to see this view too. And you're sort of, don't be that person. Just come back a little.
Now, my last quick fire.
Yeah.
Is one place, I guess we'll talk a flight location. If you were going to fly somewhere in the United States that has the most to offer within drivable distance, let's call it drivable distance, 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
Where would you go? Where is it concentrated? I know you talked a lot about travel paths and trying to get the most in.
So within 4 or 5 hours, I think Salt Lake, Seattle, and San Francisco. Actually, or Las Vegas, actually. I think one of those cities. Las Vegas, within 4 or 5 hours, you've got Death Valley, you've got the Grand Canyon, you've got Zion, you've got Valley of Fire State Park, you've got Red Rocks right outside Vegas. All of those are beautiful. Vegas, the city, I'm not a big fan of, but
Hoover Dam.
Yeah. Salt Lake, you've got, all those Salt Lake parks. Plus, you're not that far from Wyoming and Colorado.
Yes.
Seattle, you've got the Olympic Peninsula, you've got Olympic National Park, Mount Rainier, Snoqualmie Falls, the Palouse, North Cascades National Park, which was one of the least visited parks in the system. San Francisco, you've got Redwoods, Yosemite, Pinnacles. Oh, there's another one. Lassen Volcanic. There's a ton of stuff.
Perfect. Well, Tony, thank you so much. On behalf of Sony, The Sony Electronics Imaging Solutions Division would like to thank everybody for joining. Sony sponsored this wonderful event. Tony, we always thank you. We always love to have you back in. For those of you who are joining us, please take a look. We have alphauniverse.com. If you look up Sony Alpha on Instagram, as well as tonygale.com and Tony Gale on Twitter, Tony Gale Photo on Instagram. So make sure to check out Tony's work, stay updated on it. If you do need travel suggestions, just tell him that I sent you there to bother him. He apparently is pretty good at planning vacations, so I know I'm going to be using that for my own use. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank Sony for the sponsorship, and thank you, Tony, as always, for another interesting and informative webinar.
My pleasure, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks, I think.
Yes.
Or is it a week? 2 weeks?
There is one coming. Yeah,
I think it's 2 weeks.
I think it might be 2 weeks. So keep an eye on our calendar. As you all know, those of you who have been watching, we are doing full schedule of virtual event space events that we will have rolling for the foreseeable future. If there is anything you guys would like to see, feel free to jump in here and let me know. But again, thank you guys all for tuning in. Thank you, Tony, once again, and thank you, Sony. And we will see you guys next time on the virtual event space.
Thank you.